Let me ask you something. Have you ever stared at your phone, not because it rang, but because it didn't? That's silence. It's loud. It echoes in your chest at night, and it makes you question your worth, your value, your reality. But here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Silence does not mean absence, and distance does not mean indifference. Sometimes the loudest thoughts live in the quietest places. When someone doesn't call, we assume the worst. We tell ourselves stories. He moved on, he forgot, he doesn't care. But most silence isn't cold, it's conflicted. People go quiet not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much and don't know what to do with it. Silence has a way of making us feel dismissed, as if the absence of sound is proof of absence of feeling. When someone doesn't call, doesn't text, doesn't show up, the first instinct is to personalize it. We assume it's about our worth, our value, something we said wrong or didn't say enough. But silence is rarely that simple. Most people don't go quiet because they feel nothing. They go quiet because they feel too much at once. Confusion, desire, fear, regret, and longing collide, and instead of sorting through those emotions, they freeze. Silence becomes a shield, an emotional pause button, because confronting the truth would require courage they may not yet have. Internal conflict is loud on the inside, even when it looks calm on the outside. A person can carry intense thoughts while presenting nothing but distance. They replay moments they shared with you, analyze words, revisit expressions, question timing, and weigh consequences. The mind becomes a courtroom where emotions argue endlessly, but no verdict is reached. In that state, reaching out feels risky. What if they say too much? What if they say the wrong thing? What if contact reopens something they are not prepared to handle? Silence, then, is not a dismissal of you. It's a reflection of their uncertainty and emotional overload. People often confuse emotional strength with emotional suppression. They believe that if they don't speak, don't act, don't reach out, they are in control. In reality, unresolved feelings don't disappear, they burrow deeper. Silence doesn't mean clarity. It often means confusion. When someone doesn't call, it may be because they are wrestling with what your presence in their life represents. You might symbolize change, accountability, vulnerability, or growth. And not everyone is ready to face what growth demands. Silence becomes a way to delay a decision they are not prepared to make. There is also the fear of exposure hidden inside silence. Reaching out requires honesty, and honesty requires standing still long enough to be seen. When someone feels emotionally conflicted, they fear revealing that conflict. They worry that their hesitation will be interpreted as weakness, that their uncertainty will disappoint you, or that their feelings will demand more than they can give. Silence allows them to avoid explaining themselves. It allows them to keep control over the narrative by saying nothing at all, even though that silence creates confusion for the person waiting on the other end. Another layer of internal conflict is timing. People often feel deeply, but believe the moment is wrong. They may be dealing with pressure, responsibility, unresolved past experiences, or expectations placed on them by others. You can matter to someone while still being placed on hold by circumstances they don't know how to navigate. Silence, in this sense, becomes a form of emotional procrastination, not because you are unimportant, but because facing what you represent requires a level of emotional readiness they have not yet reached. The hardest truth to accept is that silence can coexist with longing. Someone can miss you and still not reach for the phone. Someone can think about you every night and still convince themselves that staying quiet is safer than opening the door again. Internal conflict creates paralysis. And paralysis looks like indifference from the outside, even when it's anything but. Silence is often the outward shape of an inward battle, one where emotions are present, active, and unresolved, but action is postponed because the cost of speaking feels heavier than the cost of staying quiet. Avoidance is a common human response when emotions feel overwhelming, but it is rarely a solution. When someone doesn't call, it's easy to assume they've moved on or stopped caring, but avoidance doesn't erase feelings, it masks them. Deep down, attachment doesn't vanish because communication ceases. The mind clings to what it knows, and the heart remembers what it values. People may appear distant, but that distance is often a protective barrier, shielding them from the vulnerability that comes with reaching out. Emotional attachment remains quietly persistent even in the absence of contact. The irony of avoidance is that it intensifies reflection rather than diminishes it. The moments that mattered most, the conversations, the laughter, the silences shared become amplified when someone steps back. Without the reassurance of dialogue, the mind revisits memories repeatedly, analyzing words, gestures, and expressions, seeking meaning where it may not be clear. This mental replay can be exhausting for both parties. For the one waiting, it fuels doubt and longing. For the one avoiding, it reinforces internal conflict and hesitation. Emotional avoidance never erases attachment. It simply transforms it into a private, often obsessive, mental loop. Avoidance can also arise from fear of vulnerability. Expressing attachment requires openness, a willingness to be seen and understood. For some, the risk of rejection or misunderstanding is unbearable. Rather than confronting the possibility of an uncomfortable truth, I miss you or I need you, they retreat into silence. Their attachment doesn't weaken, it simmers quietly, hidden behind walls they've built for self-preservation. The paradox is striking: the stronger the attachment, the more tempting avoidance can feel, because acknowledging deep feelings demands courage they may not yet possess. Attachment has a way of asserting itself, even when suppressed. Thoughts of the other person can emerge at unexpected times, while commuting, cooking, or lying awake at night. These moments of involuntary remembrance reveal that emotional ties are not extinguished by avoidance. In fact, avoidance may heighten awareness. The more someone distances themselves physically or verbally, the more their mind clings to the emotional bond. It is a reminder that attachment is resilient. It cannot be simply turned off or ignored. What is hidden often continues to grow in the quiet. Moreover, avoidance often reflects internal moral or emotional conflict. A person may care deeply, but feel incapable of meeting their own standards for how they should behave. They may wrestle with guilt, pride, or regret, feeling unworthy of expressing their feelings openly. Avoiding communication becomes a compromise, a way to reconcile strong attachment with perceived inadequacy. In these cases, silence is not a measure of lack of feeling, but a manifestation of emotional complexity. It demonstrates that attachment can be enduring even when behavior seems contradictory. Finally, the silent struggle underscores an important truth about human emotion. It is not always expressed in direct action. Thoughts, reflection, longing, and hidden concern are forms of attachment as real as words or gestures. Someone may not reach out, but their mind and heart remain engaged. Emotional avoidance does not erase attachment. It redirects it inward. They may be thinking about you, missing you, worrying about you, and yet unable to translate those feelings into a call, a text, or a meeting. Attachment survives in thought, memory, and feeling, even when expression is paused, delayed, or withheld. Fear is a powerful, invisible force that shapes human behavior more than we often admit. When someone doesn't call, it is rarely because they lack desire. They often think about you endlessly. But acting on those thoughts requires courage. Thinking allows them to explore feelings safely in a private world where consequences don't exist and judgment is suspended. Action, on the other hand, is raw and immediate. It exposes vulnerability. It demands accountability. And for many, that risk is too heavy to bear, so they retreat into the safer realm of contemplation, where longing can exist without confrontation. In thought, they can replay every meaningful interaction and examine it from every angle. They can imagine the perfect way to express themselves, the ideal words to convey emotion, the flawless timing to reach out. But when it comes to reality, imperfections, miscommunication, and rejection become real threats. The more someone values the connection, the more terrifying the possibility of saying the wrong thing or breaking the fragile balance between closeness and distance. So they stay silent even though internally their attention is fully occupied with you. Thinking becomes a substitute for action, a coping mechanism for fear. Fear manifests in many subtle ways. It may be fear of rejection, fear of being judged, fear of opening old wounds, or fear of creating new complications. Each of these fears can paralyze action even when attachment or affection runs deep. The mind becomes a battleground, weighing the risk of speaking against the comfort of remaining quiet. In this struggle, thought becomes the refuge of the cautious. They can think endlessly, but once action is required, fear interrupts and immobilizes, leaving silence to speak in place of words. The longer they avoid, the stronger the fear seems to grow because inactivity amplifies uncertainty. Interestingly, thinking itself can intensify attachment. Each imagined conversation or scenario reinforces emotional presence. Each what if creates a tapestry of longing and curiosity that keeps the other person vivid in memory. Fear may prevent real-world interaction, but it does not prevent mental engagement. In some cases, the internal fixation becomes even more consuming than direct communication would be. Inaction, shaped by fear, paradoxically deepens emotional connection. Thoughts alone can sustain longing, obsession, and reflection long after the opportunity for dialogue has passed. Fear is also compounded by pride and self-protection. A person may worry about exposing too much of themselves, fearing that acknowledgement of deep feelings could make them appear weak, needy, or vulnerable. Acting requires confronting that discomfort, and fear convinces them it is safer to think than to risk being seen fully. They may imagine the consequences of reaching out, misreading signals, being rebuffed, or awakening complicated emotions that neither party is ready to handle. This fear-driven hesitation is often misunderstood as indifference, when in reality, it is a sign of the internal battle between desire and self-preservation. Finally, the struggle between thought and action highlights a profound truth about human emotion. Desire without action is not absence of care, but a form of cautious devotion. Someone may be thinking about you nightly, replaying memories, imagining possibilities, and silently wishing to reach out. Yet fear keeps them from stepping into reality. Their mind becomes the arena where affection is safely expressed, where longing is rehearsed, and where attachment endures untouched by the risk of rejection. Thinking becomes the shadow of action, a hidden testament to connection and care that remains unseen yet intensely felt. Sometimes it's not the lack of feeling that keeps someone from reaching out, it's pride. Desire may burn quietly in their chest, but pride speaks in thunder. Pride convinces them to hold back, to wait, to maintain an image of control and strength, even when their thoughts are consumed with you. It is a force that whispers, don't call first, and don't show how much you care. In that silent battle between longing and ego, pride often wins, creating distance that looks like indifference, but is really a form of self-preservation. Pride masks vulnerability in ways that desire cannot overcome. Admitting longing Expressing care or acknowledging attachment is terrifying when pride is involved. Pride fears appearing weak or exposed. It fears rejection or misinterpretation. It fears the honesty that connection demands. So even when desire is intense, pride acts as a filter, muting outward expression. The heart may be fully engaged, but the voice remains quiet. What you see, the silence, the inaction is not the absence of emotion, but the dominance of ego over impulse. Pride often arises from previous experiences. Past hurts, betrayal, or disappointment can make someone hyper-aware of the risks in expressing emotion. They convince themselves that self-restraint is safety, that holding back protects them from repeating old mistakes. In these cases, pride is not vanity. It is armor. They may think, I will not show how much I care until I am certain, or I cannot allow my heart to be too vulnerable. Yet, this armor comes at a cost. Silence can create misunderstandings, distance, and frustration, making attachment visible only in absence. The paradox of pride is that it coexists with desire. Someone can long for your presence, think about you constantly, and even miss you deeply. Yet pride prevents action. Pride becomes the louder voice, the one dictating behavior and limiting expression. Desire, no matter how intense, is restrained by ego. They may replay scenarios in their mind, imagining how they could reach out, imagining the warmth of connection, yet pride convinces them that restraint is wiser than risk. And in that silence, attachment persists invisibly, unseen but undeniable. Pride can also be fueled by uncertainty. When someone is unsure of where they stand or how their feelings will be received, ego steps in to guard them. They wait, they hesitate, they rationalize inaction as wisdom. Every unanswered call, every unsent message is a testament to the battle between what they feel and what they are willing to risk revealing. Pride convinces them that maintaining distance is a form of control, when in reality it is fear dressed up as dignity. And so attachment remains locked inside, thriving in quiet reflection but absent in action. Ultimately, pride teaches us that human emotion is rarely straightforward. Desire and attachment can exist in full force, yet outward expression can be stifled by ego, fear, and the instinct to protect oneself. Silence, when filtered through pride, is not rejection, it is restraint. The person may think about you endlessly, feel the pull of your presence in every quiet moment, and even ache for connection, yet they do not act because pride is louder than longing. In these moments, understanding the interplay between pride and desire allows us to see that attachment can survive even when communication does not, and that sometimes the heart's intensity is hidden behind the walls we build for ourselves. Absence is deceptive. It can feel like a tool for moving on, a pause that promises clarity or relief. But in reality, it often magnifies longing instead of diminishing it. When someone doesn't call, the gap they leave is not empty. It's filled with imagination, speculation, and memory. The human mind has a way of amplifying what is missing, turning small moments into monumental memories and fleeting interactions into endless replay loops. Absence does not erase attachment. It cultivates it, feeding it with curiosity and reflection until thoughts of the person become nearly impossible to silence. Distance allows obsession to grow unchecked. When someone is not physically present or emotionally accessible, the mind fills the void. Each unanswered message, each empty night, each moment of silence becomes a canvas onto which emotions are projected. The imagination amplifies longing, and memories are revisited with greater intensity. A glance, a word, a laugh can take on monumental significance when repeated endlessly in thought. Absence does not provide closure. It fuels fixation, making you occupy mental space far larger than any real interaction could. In the quiet, obsession can thrive without interference. Absence also sharpens perception. When someone is out of reach, Every detail is remembered with unusual clarity. The tilt of a smile, the tone of a voice, the subtle gestures that once seemed trivial. These details, small in real life, become monumental in thought. The lack of contact transforms memory into reflection, reflection into analysis, and analysis into obsession. The mind builds patterns, connects dots, and creates significance where there may have been none. Absence turns longing into focus, and focus can turn into a quiet, nightly preoccupation with someone who may be unaware of the depth of attention they occupy. The paradox is cruel. The less someone reaches out, the more they occupy mental space. Waiting, wondering, and replaying the past keeps the connection alive even in silence. For the person who is absent, this dynamic can be unknowable. They may not realize how much they are thought about or how deeply attachment persists in their absence. Yet for the one who waits, absence can feel unbearable, intensifying emotions instead of allowing them to dissipate. The mind fills what the body cannot reach, and the heart cannot rest, creating a cycle where obsession is sustained by distance itself. Absence can also create idealization. When someone is not present to contradict or temper perception, the mind tends to romanticize what is remembered. Flaws are minimized, virtues magnified, and moments that were ordinary become extraordinary. This selective memory, shaped by absence, can create an image of the person that exists more vividly in thought than in reality. It is a version that may be unattainable, yet compelling, a construct that occupies the mind and heart long after physical or verbal contact has ceased. Obsession, in this sense, is nurtured not only by memory, but by the mind's capacity to embellish what is missing. Finally, absence emphasizes the unfinished nature of emotion. Closure cannot occur without understanding, without dialogue, without resolution. When someone does not call, the emotional story remains incomplete. Questions go unanswered, desires go unspoken, and the heart is left with ambiguity. In the space created by silence, obsession flourishes because the mind is unwilling to accept uncertainty without attempting to fill it with meaning. Absence, therefore, is not a remedy, it is a magnifier. It creates a private stage on which longing, desire, and reflection perform endlessly, keeping attachment alive even in the absence of contact. One of the hardest truths to accept is that another person's actions or inactions do not define your value. It is tempting to look at silence, hesitation, or avoidance and equate it with rejection, unworthiness, or failure. But your worth is not contingent on someone else's ability to act. Courage, timing, and readiness are their burdens, not yours. Just because someone cannot express what they feel, just because they cannot bridge the distance, does not mean you are invisible or insignificant. Your value exists independently of their behavior. It is easy to misinterpret silence as a reflection of inadequacy. When someone doesn't call, it triggers an internal dialogue that questions your appeal, your desirability, and your importance. But that line of thinking is a trap. Their hesitation is about them, not you. Fear, pride, uncertainty, and past experiences often dictate behavior more than attachment or affection. They may think about you constantly, miss you deeply, or feel conflicted nightly, and yet still remain silent. Their lack of action is a measure of their emotional barriers, not a measure of your worth. Worth is internal. It is anchored in your sense of self, not in external validation. Someone else's inability to communicate should not diminish the reality of your presence, the strength of your character, or the impact you have on others. You are defined by your integrity, your consistency, your compassion, and the energy you bring into the world, not by whether someone can express appreciation or affection in the way you hope. Understanding this allows you to reclaim your power, even in situations where you feel ignored or unacknowledged. Recognizing this truth also shifts perspective on attachment. When someone is thinking about you but not calling, their silence can be seen for what it is, an indication of their own limitations, not a reflection of a deficiency in you. People carry emotional baggage, fear confrontation, or struggle with self-expression. Their inaction speaks to their journey, their fears, and their internal conflicts. By separating their courage or lack thereof from your self-worth, you free yourself from unnecessary guilt, doubt, and anxiety. Moreover, your worth is constant even in uncertainty. You do not become more valuable when someone reaches out, nor less when they hesitate. Silence may be frustrating, longing may be intense, and unanswered questions may linger, but these external factors do not alter the intrinsic value you hold. It is in moments of waiting, reflection, and introspection that your understanding of self-worth is truly tested. Maintaining belief in your value, despite the absence of validation, is a sign of emotional maturity and strength. Finally, understanding that your worth is independent of someone else's courage allows you to hold space for both love and boundaries. You can acknowledge that someone may be thinking about you nightly without letting that define your experience or demand your patience. You can recognize their internal struggle while protecting your energy, your time, and your peace. Their hesitation is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It is a reflection of their own limitations. In the quiet of absence, in the tension of longing, your value remains unshaken, untethered, and undeniable. So if the phone stays silent tonight, if the messages never come, remember this: silence is not the measure of your value. Someone thinking about you does not always mean they act. Someone holding back does not diminish what you are. You are not defined by the courage or hesitation of another. You are defined by the strength you carry, the love you give, and the presence you bring into the world. Let the quiet remind you that hearts can think without speaking, that longing can exist without permission, and that attachment can live in the shadows while your life moves forward in the light. Their silence is theirs, but your worth is yours. You do not wait for validation, you embody it, and perhaps in time they will reach for you, guided by their thoughts, by their reflections, by the undeniable truth of what they feel. But until that moment comes, carry yourself with the knowledge that you are seen, you are valued, and you are unforgettable, whether or not anyone picks up the phone. Because the strongest connections are not measured by words spoken, but by the hearts that cannot forget, even in silence.